At the helm.
An up-close, informative, and revealing look at the work of the men and women tasked with running the affairs of state. Wide-ranging and in-depth interviews with the policymakers responsible for economic development and nation building.
At the helm.
An unvarnished and candid discussion with the power brokers on government policy and the pocketbook matters confronting St. Lucian citizens.
At the helm.
Intriguing, insightful, and instructive. I am Winston Springer, and with me is the Minister for External Affairs, International Trade and Civil Aviation, the Honorable Alva Babtiste. Welcome to At the Helm, Mr. Minister.
Thank you very much.
I am aware that your assumption of office as Minister for External Affairs, International Trade and Civil Aviation is not your first stint at that ministry, since as a specialist in civil aviation, you worked there previously. Can you just reminisce a little on your original experience at that ministry?
My original experience at the Ministry of External Affairs as the island's Chief Aviation Officer was a very interesting one. At that time, we were dealing with a very complex and fluid world situation. We were experiencing the full brunt of the loss of trade preferences. We were experiencing then decline in official development assistance, and St. Lucia had to basically reinvent itself. St. Lucia was actively involved in the major discussions of the ACP, CARICOM, OECS, and other organizations that it believes would have assisted in matching its basic need with greater possibilities. At that time, I remember our own Sir Julian Robert Hunt ascending to the presidency of the United Nations General Assembly. So it was a period for us where, despite the fact that we were grappling with the objective reality of a very complex and turbulent world situation, we had a lot to celebrate, like our own Sir Julian ascending to the presidency of the UN.
How long did you spend there as the senior aviation specialist there?
Between 2002 and 2005, at which time I resigned from the public service to participate in a runoff in June of 2005, and the elections was in December of 2006.
So upon leaving there, you pursued a career, to pursue a career in politics?
Yes.
Okay. On your return then as minister, what sort of perceptions did you have of St. Lucia's position in international relations? And was there a particular orientation that you wanted to give the ministry in the context of St. Lucia positioning itself in the international sphere?
First of all, I must say, in sharp contrast to what I left as the island's civil aviation officer, I found a St. Lucia that was absent from the major discussions going on in the world. We were not very active in the OECS, we were not very active in CARICOM, we were not very active in ACP, and at a time where I believe we should be doing much more to really respond to a more turbulent world situation, because the entire world as if was searching for a new beginning, because we saw blocks of nations broke apart and reinvented themselves. And so we felt at that time St. Lucia should be involved. Fortunately, very soon after assuming the posture of minister at the Ministry of External Affairs, I became the president of the ACP Council of Ministers. And St. Lucia was back in the ACP participating at the highest level. We, of course, chaired CARICOM, where my prime minister was the chairman of CARICOM, and I chaired the community council of CARICOM. And I've chaired many of the CARICOM meetings, whether on the margins of the UNGA or when we go to the OAS. We have had a significant amount of meetings where I've actually chaired those meetings. So I feel now St. Lucia is very much involved in the business of the major institutions that are relevant to our own development. But we felt as a government that the first thing we should do is to bring to the muddled international affairs a clarity of thinking and interpretation. Because we came in, the only constant people talk about is change. Every day something new is happening in the diplomatic sphere. And so we felt it necessary to conduct an external relations review. And we appointed a 5-man committee headed by Dr. Luis to actually conduct this particular exercise.
Well, you are in the early part of your 3rd year as a minister. Can you highlight the main aspects on which you have put emphasis in relations to or in relations with other countries?
Very well. First of all, I must say that the central objective of the government really is, 1, to reintegrate the country in a rapidly changing global environment. Secondly, to promote and strengthen multilateralism at both the regional and international levels. To pursue economic diplomacy with non-traditional countries, to expand the country's economic links internationally, and to attract foreign direct investment, as well as to play a more leading role, a more pivotal role in the international sustainable development agenda. Today, we believe that it is relevant for us to mainstream sustainable development in the business of government. So the emphasis of the ministry has been to support the country's development. From the Ministry of External Affairs, we mobilize scholarships, a number of scholarships in different fields for St. Lucia, whether it's medicine, engineering, etc., from countries in the hemisphere, from our traditional friends and non-traditional friends. We have gotten support for the Ministry of Health. Only recently, Mexico has agreed to fund a project in the Denri Valley to develop a treatment plant and other facilities to ensure that we treat the water coming from the river that currently goes directly to people's homes without being treated. Now, Denri has recorded the highest levels of E. coli, which impact negatively on the health of the people in that particular region. So my ministry is impacting infrastructure. My ministry is impacting health at the same time, because if it is the poor people who do not have access to the clean water, they are not the ones who can afford the bottled water, and obviously they will drink water directly from the pipes. And the very people who probably do not have resources to drink proper water would not have the resources to actually go through the extensive treatment that may be required at the hospitals. So we are trying to prevent those incidents by putting measures in place so that we limit the number of persons from that area that would go to the hospitals and health centers for treatment, putting further pressure on our health structure.
Are CARICOM and other OACS countries functioning in the manner that St. Lucia would like to see them function?
Very interesting question, Winston. CARICOM came into existence prior to the end of the Cold War, and so there was a particular orientation. We witnessed the end of the Cold War, and CARICOM continued in a particular mode. Recently, CARICOM invited some consultants to review the structure of CARICOM in light of current realities. Because CARICOM itself has recognized we cannot embrace old myths in the face of current realities. And so that particular exercise is well underway. Some changes are being made at the Secretariat of the CARICOM. Notwithstanding, I believe CARICOM is invaluable to our region. We coordinate foreign policy and trade policy at the CARICOM level. And we have some very dedicated people at the Secretariat with the cerebral competence to advise the various governments in the region. However, moving forward, I think the major challenge would be for national governments to redefine the national priorities, to communicate to CARICOM, so that as an entity coordinating trade and foreign policy, CARICOM can now best assist us in matching that basic need with greater possibilities. The level of the OACS, whilst CARICOM is more clinical, in the OACS we are more pragmatic about what we do for the OACS region. For example, we we purchase in bulk in terms of pharmaceuticals. We have a sports desk. We coordinate our activities in education. We have a common Eastern Caribbean Civil Aviation Authority. We have a common currency. And therefore, given the new and complex world situation, we must encourage fiscal discipline in the various jurisdictions to ensure that we protect our currency.
So are you saying that these organizations, two organizations, CARICOM and OECS, are functioning in the manner that St. Lucia would like to see them function?
Well, I mean...
Is there anything lacking?
We can always...
What else would you like to see happen?
Okay. Like I said, it's very early to expect CARICOM to simply respond to the new challenges because the exercise is ongoing, so we are strengthening the internal machinery of CARICOM. So CARICOM is definitely functioning. If we really want to see the true relevance of CARICOM, she's trying a region without CARICOM. Just take away CARICOM from our region, and then we will fully appreciate the significance of CARICOM. Currently, we have our own Dr. Didicus Jules at the helm of the OECS, and that is a very positive development, given his track record as being a very serious and sober professional, hardworking, and of course dedicated to ensuring that he brings some level of prudence to that particular organization. At a time where there's serious curtailment of income, I believe that he's going to restructure the OECS and have it to function effectively and efficiently, given the tight budget that we have at this particular point in time. So I'm saying that he was recently appointed to that position, so we still have to wait to really see the decisions unfold in the manner in which it would help strengthen the OECS as an entity and impact positively on the islands of the OECS.
Do the other islands of the OECS have any problems with the prevalence of St. Lucians as Director General of the OECS? Since the formation of the OECS, St. Lucia, in that short space of time, there have been 3 St. Lucians at the helm or as Director General of the OECS. Do the other islands have any problems with that?
Well, I would be entering the sphere of speculation. I would prefer to say that we entertain applications from every country in the OECS for the head of our OECS Secretariat. So if St. Lucians have emerged in the past and emerge now, it means that they consider the St. Lucians to have the cerebral competence to deal with the business of the OECS. And among all the applicants, they probably see a more favorable outcome.
Very diplomatically put. This is At the Helm. We'll be back in just a moment.
Our agriculture can be threatened when persons or travelers bring with them foreign plants or animals into our country. Please check with the Crop Protection Unit at telephone number 468-5601 or 450-2375 or the Veterinary Services Division at 468-5621, who will advise you as to what is allowed into the country.
This is At the Helm, and with me is the Minister for External Affairs, International Trade and Civil Aviation, the Honorable Alva Babtiste. I am Winston Springer. Mr. Minister, speak a little about St. Lucia's orientation towards the wider Caribbean and Latin American countries in the context of what the government refers to as its diversification or the diversification of its international relations.
Very well. Most times, we have heard the saying that people sometimes look for love in the wrong faces and in the wrong places. We want to ensure that we scan our immediate hemisphere. And so the government felt we should consolidate our relationship with our hemisphere, not just North America, but Central America and South America. And so, as part of the diversification process, we have forged closer links with our neighbors in Latin America. We have developed better relations with Venezuela, better relations with Mexico, better relations with Colombia, better relations with Guatemala. We recently established diplomatic relations with Honduras. We did not have diplomatic relations with Honduras. And we have had diplomatic relations with countries very far away from us. So we are of the view that there are existing agreements in place between St. Lucia and some of those countries that we must give life to, that we can cooperate in the fields of health, agriculture, youth and sports, so that we can bring something that exists to our development that we have not activated. So it is extremely useful for us to strengthen our relations within that hemisphere to ensure that St. Lucia do not only benefit from Australia, the European Union and other countries that are relatively far away, but in our own region, we can cooperate more and we can coordinate responses in a better fashion that at least would constitute to organizing a better tomorrow for the peoples of this particular hemisphere.
St. Lucia has been one of the latest CARICOM countries to join Petrocarib and Alba. And, well, the Alba talk, has been one that has been very, has been ongoing in St. Lucia.
Yes.
The other political party seems to have problems with us joining Alba. Can you tell us a little about Alba and why and what the country expects to gain from extension of its relations with Venezuela, bearing in mind that St. Lucia and Venezuela have had diplomatic relations for a number of years now?
Yes, despite all the noise about our relations with Venezuela and Petrocarib and Alba, the reality is Venezuela has indicated an interest in St. Lucia long before we gain our independence.
Yeah.
So Venezuela has been one of our friends from independence. This is not the first time that we have cooperated with Venezuela. Today...
And relations already started with
yes,
Prime Minister Compton.
That is correct. As far back as
that, yes.
Yes,
so I wonder sometimes whether the other political party is aware of that.
Well, I guess some people just mischievous, or they just speak without paying attention to history. But of course, our relationship with countries in our hemisphere has nothing to do with ideology. The ideological position of countries is the private business. We cooperate with our neighbors to ensure that we match our basic need with greater possibilities. We came into office in 2011. We found a fiscal deficit in the economy at a time when there's a loss of official development assistance. Now, our major development partners are saying that St. Lucia is an upper middle income country and no longer qualified for concessionary financing, etc. We have moved from the Lomé Convention to the Economic Partnership Agreement under the Cotonou Agreement. And this has fundamentally altered the way that we have done business in the past. What do we do as a country? Just blame the former government for the fiscal deficit or do something about the situation? And we prefer to do something about the situation. So our involvement in Alba is really to ease the squeeze on the people of this country. If there is a fiscal deficit in the economy, it means that you cannot generate any surplus to invest in capital spending. And so recently, Alba gave us millions of dollars that we can build a couple bridges in the country. A bridge in Dennery North, which is a major highway leading the south and the north, is under construction. And the Foncouli Bridge at Bellevue, which is completed. And there will be an official opening very soon. So obviously, it prevents us from going to borrow from a financial institution at that point when we really do not have great capacity to borrow. So it's a cooperation entity that will facilitate the social and economic development of its members. Petro-Caribe will give us some level of space because of the cost, the lower cost of the fuel. And the difference could be used to invest in tourism, education, sports activities, etc. So I don't want to really entertain the noise of Alba, but rather speak to the benefits of that entity to us at this particular point in time.
How was Alba assisted in the reconstruction efforts after the disasters we have had, like Hurricane Thomas and the Christmas Eve trough, and other minor disasters that have occurred in this country in the terms of the reconstruction effort?
Well, after Thomas, we were not in Alba.
But then when y'all came into office, a lot of the work was ongoing.
Yes, yes. So that's why I mentioned, for example, the Dennery Bridge and the Fonkuli Bridge. The Fonkuli Bridge was almost non-existent. Half of it had already collapsed, and so it was the Alba funds that replaced that bridge, and we see a new bridge. And I think in time to come, when we have addressed all the bridges that were destroyed or damaged in some way, that we have to go and look at all the bridges that have not yet been carried away by water because they have outlived the usefulness. Most of the bridges were built for a certain period of time, and that period of time has actually elapsed. And so we need to engage in more infrastructural works in the country, and Alba will become very useful in assisting us in doing just that.
How is the CARICOM European Union Economic Partnership progressing, and are you satisfied with how it's going?
Well, as you know, within the ACP, CARICOM relied a lot on the African states for support. By forming the ACP, we saw an opportunity for the African continent, the Pacific states, and of course the Caribbean islands to come together as a force to deal with the challenges of the Cotonou Agreement, which of course came after the Lomé Convention, the loss of preferential treatment. And so when we negotiated the EPA, it was the Caribbean region that actually signed first. The African states are still in negotiations, as well as the Pacific states. So it has been a rather ticklish situation, a rather turbulent period for our relations within the organization itself. But it's premature to really assess the full impact of the EPA because most countries have not fully implemented the Economic Partnership Agreement.
We have traditionally had good relations with Canada. A location, many citizens of St. Lucia, where many people from St. Lucia live, going way back to the 50s. But we have heard recently about difficulties about the granting of visas. Do you care to comment on this?
Yeah, I will just comment briefly by indicating to you that the genesis of this particular visa facility came about as a result of complaints from the Canadian authorities of St. Lucians who are engaged in various activities in Canada. Every country in the world would have some undesirable elements who would engage in things that are not too pleasant. And St. Lucia would not be immune. You go to Canada, you'd find people doing things that are inconsistent with the spirit of the law. But that happened prior to the St. Lucia Labour Party getting into office in 2011. I felt that as a new government, Canada being an ally of St. Lucia, a traditional friend, could have engaged us in some level of discussion towards joint surveillance as to how we can cooperate under our respective mandates to ensure that we remedy whatever situation existed. But instead, we got a diplomatic note indicating that effective midnight, visa facilities would be imposed. I mean, it's not a development that we welcome, but, I just want to make that point that as a traditional friend, as an ally, we thought that it could have been handled better in terms of putting mechanisms in place as a new government to actually respond to the situation.
What of relations with the United States? some people are not happy about the issuing or granting of visas to members of our police force. Do you have a sense of how St. Lucians in the United States see our relations with that country?
First of all, we have normal relations with the United States of America. Undoubtedly, there is no tension between Castries and Washington. The issue with the police is distinct and separate. It's a matter that the U.S. Has expressed some concerns, and we have put certain mechanisms in place to ensure that we address the concerns of the United States of America. But I wish to accentuate that relations between Castries and Washington is normal.
How would you see your period in office as Minister for Civil Aviation, International Relations? I know civil aviation is dear to your heart,
yes.
And you know the whole ministry. How would you assess your period in office?
I would say that I am quite pleased that despite the fact that most countries are not as generous as before in terms of giving us assistance, in terms of official development assistance, that my ministry has been able to attract millions of dollars for the country's development. In the aftermath of the Christmas Eve trough, we were able to attract in the vicinity of $10 million to help the country get back, on track. This is why in quick time, the country was back to almost normalcy. With the exception of the open wound that exists close to the Deriso Junction, which we have gotten to date about $700,000 towards its construction from Turkey. We are certainly going to address that issue very soon. But outside of that open wound, the country is almost back to normal. We are addressing the problems after Thomas and in the battle at this particular point in time. So I believe that the ministry has been playing a very important role in assisting the country now, given the fiscal deficit that we have, and we cannot generate the surplus to invest in capital expenditure, that we are able to provide such support for the country at this point in time. So
hold this thought. We have to take a break now, and
yes.
We'll come back. This is At the Helm. We'll be back in a moment.
My vision for my island home is one where everyone is happy, where everyone has a job and earns a good wage.
A country where we all have a good home and family.
Where there is less crime and violence, and if there are problems, we work them out.
I would like a St. Lucia where we all enjoy a clean and healthy environment with no pollution.
Where all children are safe and have a good education so that we can become better citizens in the future.
This is my vision for my country, St. Lucia.
This is At the Helm, and with me, Winston Springer, is the Minister for External Affairs, International Relations and Civil Aviation, the Honorable Alva Babtiste. Mr. Babtiste, when we took the break, you were talking to summarizing your period in office, the last 3 years. Could you take it from there and go on and tell me about your plans in office, the Ministry of External Affairs, for the future, the next 2 years in office?
Right. Given the climate that currently exists, the Ministry of External Affairs will continue to assist the country in its development, in the field of education, in the field of agriculture, in the field of health, and many other disciplines and ministries in the country to ensure that we mobilize support internationally for our development. But we will continue to consolidate active participation, status, and role in the international political and economic systems. We will continue to promote multilateralism at the regional and international level. We will continue to pursue economic diplomacy with non-traditional countries in order to expand the country's economic links internationally. and attract foreign direct investment and continue to play a pivotal role in the international sustainable development agenda. Obviously, moving forward, we need to redefine our national priorities. One of the things that my ministry is looking forward to from the Ministry of Economic Planning is for us to decide on the new requirements of the St. Lucian economy. When we have carefully defined the new requirements, we are going to look at how education could assist even more in our quest for a better St. Lucia. I know that the Labour Party at some time did indicate in one of its manifestos and on platform that it wanted a graduate in each household. We are prepared to assist the government at this time. If we can now say by what year we want to achieve that, and for us to determine how many scholarships we need per annum to really achieve that particular objective, and in the different disciplines that we require the scholarships. I have actually singled out education because education will always assist countries in its forward movement. Russia owes certainly its own development as a superpower and developed country to education. It mounted from the status of underdeveloped country to developed country and superpower, mainly on the wings of education. Japan owes its phenomenal growth as an industrial power to education. Taiwan and many other countries you see today that are quite successful did place tremendous emphasis on education. But the education must be made relevant to the new realities. And this is why we need to challenge ourselves by defining the requirements of the new St. Lucian economy so that our ministry can assist in education, in trying to develop St. Lucia as a hub for the OECS in the field of medicine. When I spoke with the Minister for Health in Argentina, one of the things that I shared with him was that we wanted to make St. Lucia a hub for the rest of the OECS. So there would be an initial period of cooperation where doctors from Argentina would be coming in, doctors from St. Lucia would be going up there and being exposed to better technology, etc., where we can link that with our medical schools, our offshore medical schools, and our hospitals, even to the extent that we engage in research for certain things that impact negatively on our society. Hypertension and diabetes are two of the areas. I know Spartan had indicated an interest some time ago in working with the St. Joe's Hospital in that regard. And so these are the kind of things that we want to assist the country in doing. But obviously we cannot do it alone. We need to clearly define the way forward. And I know that we are actively involved in trying to fine-tune policies that will ensure our survival. But moving forward, our foreign policy must not be based on the whims and fancies of political parties. Because if we are to power ahead with consistency and purpose, we must have a consistent foreign policy posture. And I think I want to go back to the committee that engaged in that review of our external relations policy. Right now, that very team is going to fine-tune the recommendations of that particular policy to put in place St. Lucia's actual foreign policy. So you can go on the web and see exactly how we are pitching, what our intentions are. And I think that whatever is going to be articulated will be acceptable to any government that would come and occupy the corridors of power.
You are soon to leave for the next session of the United Nations General Assembly, due to take place, I think, opening next week. What do you expect from the next session of the General Assembly, bearing in mind the turmoil in Ukraine, the Ebola virus in West Africa, the threat of ISIS, and other trouble spots around the world?
Yes. Obviously, I expect such issues to really dominate the agenda as it really engrosses the energies of the people of the world. Whilst we seem remote from such realities that we in the Caribbean are peace-loving citizens, we do not have a history of being bloodthirsty warmongers, we must not believe that we are safe in our region simply because we are many miles away from the trouble spot. I think whatever is happening in the world today must be of concern to all peace-loving citizens of the world. And the United Nations is an organization that promotes peace. But they always said that peace is not the absence of war. We have our own wars in our region to fight. You go around many areas in St. Lucia and you see the result of heavy shelling between unemployment and poverty with the citizens of this country. And that's a kind of war in itself that we have to fight at home. So the theater of war is also present in our country, and we need to articulate very clearly our position moving forward on the vulnerabilities of our small islands and the need for the bigger countries to assist us in our development. We go to conferences all the time. There was a big SEEDS conference in Samoa. Unless there are practical commitments at the end of Samoa, unless we are prepared to set in motion the necessary policies, put in place the necessary mechanisms that will ensure that the stronger help the poor, all that conference will end up, in the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., as a meaningless drama on the stage of history. And so at the United Nations, we will be speaking to that particular issue. Another very important issue for us is the exclusion of Cuba from the OAS. It has been a sore point for a very long time. And I believe that you are going to see some greater efforts on the part of the region in particular, and that is the OAS region, the countries of the Caribbean and Latin America, to encourage greater contact between the United States and Cuba with the central objective of ending the embargo and for there to be normal relations in our region. Because at this point in time, we need to strengthen the internal machinery of the OAS. We need to strengthen security in our region. And we need every country in Latin America. We need every country in the Caribbean. We need every country that exists in our hemisphere to participate responsibly in this exercise. And Cuba cannot be left out of that very important assignment.
Mr. Minister, there is the vexing question in some quarters of the granting of passports or the selling of passports to foreign nationals at a price. I can't remember the term exactly, the term used, but it's ongoing
Economic
in St. Kitts.
citizenship.
Economic citizenship. It's ongoing in St. Kitts. It's ongoing in Dominica and in some other islands of the Caribbean. But these people get these citizenship, or the citizenship in these islands, and because we are all OECS countries, the freedom of travel is allowed. So these people get citizenship in St. Kitts and end up in St. Lucia.
Yes.
They get citizenship in Dominica, end up in St. Lucia. How is your government addressing this issue? And is St. Lucia likely to join that group of islands in the granting of economic citizenship, which seem to be rather lucrative for St. Kitts and for Dominica?
Very well. I think there are certain realities that we must grapple with, and St. Lucia does not exist in isolation to the rest of the world. But that does not mean because other OECS countries have moved into a particular field or a particular thing that we should quickly embrace it. So economic citizenship has been around. Countries in the Caribbean have benefited from it. And it is not something that St. Lucia on its own can respond to and say we do not want nationals of other countries that hold OECS passports to just come in St. Lucia or to enjoy the same benefits. We need to take a regional approach towards the resolution of any issue that will emerge out of the granting of economic citizenship by one of our sister islands. St. Lucia has put a committee in place to examine this whole issue of economic citizenship, whether St. Lucia should entertain it or not, and the impact of economic citizenship on the wider Caribbean. Given the very problem that you articulated, that persons, even though you do not have it in place, but given the fact that some other national is equipped with a passport from another OACS country, and we have the freedom of movement within our region, whether you debar people from coming in, we must be very clear as to how we proceed with that. And we cannot be emotional about things like that, because emotion is never a substitute for intelligence. So we need to move intelligently in this regard. So the committee will certainly at some point provide us with its own recommendations as to the way forward.
But the islands who went ahead with the economic citizenship package, they didn't consult, say, the other OECS partners?
Well, I guess, you know, sometimes when we do things, we do not comprehend it in all of its ramifications. So we felt that economic citizenship in St. Kitts was a St. Kitts thing, but it ended up not being a St. Kitts thing. It ended up being, you know, an OECS thing, and so we have to respond to it. But I mean, this is not unusual. Sometimes we pass laws, and we have to review them. When we initially set them in motion, there are lots of objections to it, and so we present a second version that will be less vulnerable to objection until we get it right. So I think the economic citizenship issue is a typical example of that, where it was set in motion in other jurisdiction without really considering the full impact of the entire region. And some countries were fast asleep while that was happening, and only to be confronted with the reality when they open their eyes that, look, whilst it is happening in St. Kitts, it will impact the rest of us, and so we need to respond to it. But like I say, not emotionally, but intelligently.
This is At the Helm. With me, the Honorable Alva Babtiste, the Minister for External Affairs, International Trade and Civil Aviation. We'll be back in a moment.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, hello, I'm Dr. Christy Daniel, consultant urologist. I'd like to talk to you about sexually transmitted disease and HIV prevention. Do you know your ABCs of sexually transmitted disease and HIV prevention? A is for abstinence, the only 100% sure way to prevent HIV and other STDs. B is for being faithful. A monogamous relationship or having a single partner works every time. C is for condoms. Use properly, they work and protect yourself and your partners. I'm urging you, therefore, to educate yourself, know your ABCs, prevent HIV and other sexually transmitted diseases.
Welcome back to At the Helm with the Minister for External Affairs, Civil Aviation and International Trade, the Honorable Alva Babtiste. And Mr. Babtiste is also the representative for what he loves to call the People's Republic of Labrie. Mr. Minister, as the representative for what you always, so lovingly call the People's Republic of Labrie, are you satisfied with what you have achieved as the representative for Labrie for the last, well, let's say 7 or 8 years ongoing?
Thank you very much. I have tried my very best to deliver to my people and to support the development and to actually respond to the things that are of tremendous importance to them. I have been pleasantly surprised, given the nature of people, that when I go through my constituency, people are expressing great satisfaction with my work to date. And I just want to articulate some of the things that I do, because I'm not that of a TV personality that when I contribute to my constituency for it to be a news item. But from the time I became the parliamentary representative for the constituency of Labrie, I wanted to re-engage the youth of the community. I encouraged the revitalization of the Library Youth and Sports Council. I was a member and an executive member for a very long time. And we took youth and sports activities to a fundamentally new level when we were there. And it dipped slightly afterwards, and we wanted to take it back. So I started with the schools. I am the main contributor to the sporting activities at each of my primary schools. I am probably the only constituency without a secondary school on the island. I have 4 primary schools: the Auger Combined, the Library Boys Primary School, the Library Girls Primary School, and the Bans-Lagoas Combined School. So on an annual basis, I contribute all the trophies and medals for the sporting events in the constituency. To encourage academic excellence, I have made an award available in each of the primary schools again for the child that topped the common entrance exam in my school. So at the Library Girls Primary School, I call the award the Agafa Japanel Award of Excellence. So I give that child $1,000. The one at the Bans-Lagoas Combined School, we have the only principal coming from the area, Virginia Edward, and that award is made in her name as a Virginia Edward Award of Excellence. Mr. Watson Louis was the principal of the Auger Combined School for a very long time, very much immersed in community activities, was one of the founders of the Library Cooperative Credit Union. And so in his name, I made the award at the Auger Combined School, the Watson Louis Award of Excellence. It was actually the very first award that I made at the school, another $1,000 for the student that emerged as with the top score at that particular institution. At the Library Boys Primary School, there was Mr. Vincent Glasgow, former principal of the Library Boys, one who was a very outstanding citizen of the constituency, quite patriotic, a very proud Liberian. And in his name, I made the award, the Vincent Glasgow Award of Excellence at that school. So between the sporting awards as well as the scholarships, which is done on an annual basis, I believe that there is a certain degree of satisfaction with my support for the school. At Christmas time, I ensure that every child at each of my primary schools goes home with a toy. So the number of students at each of the schools, the number of males and females at the various grades, so that the toys are actually tailored to meet the age group that we are dealing with. So at Christmas time, in each of my primary schools, I would ensure that there are toys. And I contribute ice cream, for the Christmas parties. So we do that calculation as well for each of my schools in the community. We had a cultural icon who recently passed away, called Joseph Ives Simeon. He was a violinist, very outstanding man, very simple, very humble man from the community. And before he made his terrestrial demise, we were able to have the very first Joseph Ives Simeon cultural event. And he was actually present. And just a few weeks after, he migrated to the silent continents of eternity. So I was extremely happy that he was there to witness the very first event. And I mean, at the time that we had the event, he wasn't bedridden, he was not sick. He actually sang a few of the songs that I really like from his album. And he sang at that particular event. So I have been the sole sponsor of that cultural event, because I believe youth and sports is not simply about cricket and football alone. Right now, I am the main sponsor of our football competition in the constituency. We recently had our Soccerama, which incidentally was aired on HTS. So there are two of them that I'll be doing, the Socorama as well as the James ATN tournament, knockout tournament in the community, as my contribution to ensure that we maintain a certain level in the community of Labrie. I assisted the Labrie boys in accessing some computers for the computer lab, given the period that we're in. The OG Combined School contributed again some computers and ensured that they have Wi-Fi connection right now, gave them some routers. And so they are enjoying, you know, some level of relief from not having access to now having access. So, but there's still a need for us to build a computer lab and a proper library because the area had some issues. So we are working on that. So leaving the youth component in the community of Labrie, the community of Bas-Lagoas, Laho, Auger, I make sure that during Christmas time, our elderly get some level of satisfaction from whatever excitement is in the air. So I have a lease. I have the St. Vincent de Paul people to assist me in coming up with needy people so that we take away the partisan aspect of it, and we have hampers and we distribute it to the various homes of the elderly. I think this year we plan to experiment with it differently by probably having it more central, give it to package the various hampers and give it to St. Vincent de Paul so that they can distribute to the persons that we have agreed to on the list. Roads have been a very troublesome issue
infrastructure
for our people in the constituency. And I must say that despite the fact that we're in the most turbulent of times, I have been successful in doing 8 roads in the Auger area. And very soon we will see a Bakapesh and Monve, a very significant road under construction. In the Labrie village, we have seen a number of roads, like Father Brochure Street, West Hall Group, Eucalyptus Avenue, the Lamar area have been, you know, receiving some great assistance from the government. And of course, I ensure that I represent the interest in a fashion that can actually create a better environment for them. I know that there was a main drain coming from Lamar to the place called Labat, which is Father Brochure Street. And that used to undermine the stability of people's homes. And that main drain was constructed, and it's a major relief. After the heavy rains last year, I visited the area about 1 o'clock in the morning and found that, you know, people were sleeping in their beds, you know, peacefully, as opposed to before. They would have actually got out of their homes to see whether they still had a house, you know, at the edge, because it was badly damaged.
In about 2 minutes, are you satisfied so far with the progress, and what are your plans for future development of your dearly beloved People's Republic of Labrie?
Yes. In fact, we still have some major infrastructural works to do, like the Labrie Market, the Olibo playing field, which we started in 2006, and we want to really create a positive facility that could serve as a youth center, a multipurpose center, multipurpose court, and playing area in one central location. We would need external assistance for that. The Labrie Market, the Auger multipurpose center and multipurpose court. These are among the big infrastructural requirements of the constituency at this particular point in time. And I'm hoping that between now and the end of our term, that we will be able to mobilize the resources necessary to undertake such projects.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. It's been a pleasure having you. The Minister for External Affairs, International Trade and Civil Aviation, also the representative for what he loves to call his dearly beloved People's Republic of Labrie, the Honorable Alva Babtiste. My name is Winston Springer. Goodbye for now.
At the helm.
An up-close, informative, and revealing look at the work of the men and women tasked with running the affairs of state. Wide-ranging and in-depth interviews with the policymakers responsible for economic development and nation building.
At the helm.
An unvarnished and candid discussion with the power brokers on government policy and the pocketbook matters confronting St. Lucian citizens.
At the helm.
Intriguing, insightful, and instructive.